Hazards exist in every workplace and in many different forms. Sharp edges, falling objects, flying sparks, chemicals, noise, and other potential dangerous situations. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration requires the use of personal protective equipment to reduce employee exposure to hazards when engineering and administrative controls are not feasible or effective. Yet nearly 2 million people have a debilitating work-related injury each year, with more than a quarter of these injuries involving the hands, eyes, head, and feet. Many of these accidents could have been prevented if the injured workers wore the proper personal protective equipment to shield their body from occupational dangers. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, is designed to protect workers from serious workplace injuries or illnesses resulting from contact with chemical, radiological, physical, electrical, mechanical, or other workplace hazards. Examples of PPE include items such as gloves, foot and eye protection, protective hearing devices, hard hats, respirators, and full-body suits. Controlling a hazard at its source is the best way to protect employees. Depending on the hazard or workplace condition, OSHA recommends the use of engineering or work practice controls to manage or eliminate hazards to the greatest extent possible. When engineering, work practices, and administrative controls are not feasible and do not provide sufficient protection, employers must provide personal protective equipment to their employees and ensure its use. Personal protective equipment is not a substitute for good engineering or administrative controls, but it should be used in conjunction with these controls to ensure the safety and health of employees. To ensure the greatest possible protection for employees in the workplace, the cooperative efforts of both employers and employees will help in establishing and maintaining a safe and healthful work environment. Employer's responsibility: performing a hazard assessment of the workplace to identify and control physical and health hazards, identifying and providing appropriate PPE for employees, training employees in the use and care of PPE, maintaining PPE, including replacing worn or damaged PPE, and periodically reviewing, updating, and evaluating the effectiveness of the PPE program. Employers must pay for personal protective equipment. OSHA requires employers to pay for personal protective equipment used to comply with OSHA standards. The standard makes clear that the employers cannot require workers to provide their own PPE, and the workers' use of PPE they already own must be completely voluntary. Even when a worker provides his or her own PPE, the employer must ensure that the equipment is adequate to protect the worker from the hazards at the workplace. Examples of PPE that employers must pay for include hard hats, hearing protection, goggles and face shields, rubber boots with steel toes, metatarsal foot protection, non-prescription eye protection, prescription eyewear inserts or lenses for full-face respirators, welding PPE, and firefighting PPE. Employers are not required to pay for some PPE in certain circumstances. Non-specialty safety toe protective footwear, including steel-toe shoes or boots, and non-specialty prescription safety eyewear, provided that the employer permits such items to be worn off the job site. Everyday clothing, such as long-sleeve shirts, long pants, street shoes, and normal work boots. Ordinary clothing, skin creams, or other items used solely for protection from weather, such as winter coats, jackets, gloves, parkas, rubber boots, hats, raincoats, ordinary sunglasses, and sunscreen. And when an employee has lost or intentionally damaged the PPE, it must be replaced. Employees' responsibility: properly wear PPE, attend training sessions on PPE, care for, clean, and maintain PPE, and inform a supervisor of the need to repair or replace PPE. The first critical step in developing a comprehensive safety and health program is to identify physical and health hazards in the workplace. This process is known as hazard assessment. The hazard assessment should begin with a walkthrough survey of the facility to develop a list of potential hazards in the following basic hazard categories: impact, penetration, compression, chemical, heat and cold, harmful dust, light radiation, and biologic. The workplace should be periodically reassessed for any changes in conditions, equipment, or operating procedures that could affect occupational hazards. Documentation of the hazard assessment is required through a written certification that includes the following information: identification of the workplace evaluated, name of the person conducting the assessment, date of the assessment, and identification of the document certifying completion of the hazard assessment. Employers should take the fit and comfort of PPE into consideration when selecting appropriate items for their workplace. PPE that fits well and is comfortable to wear will encourage employees to use PPE. OSHA requires that many categories of PPE meet or be equivalent to standards developed by American National Standards Institute. Employers are required to train each employee who must use PPE on the following information: when PPE is necessary, what PPE is necessary, how to properly put on, take off, adjust and wear the PPE, the limitations of the PPE, and proper care, maintenance, useful life, and disposal of the PPE. Evaluation and documentation. The employee must demonstrate understanding of the PPE training and the ability to properly wear and use PPE before they are allowed to perform the work requiring the use of PPE. If an employer believes that a previously trained employee is not demonstrating the proper understanding and skill level in the use of PPE, that employee must receive retraining. Other situations that require additional or retraining of employees include the following circumstances: changes in the workplace or in the type of required PPE that make the prior training obsolete. OSHA requires employers to ensure that employees have appropriate eye or face protection if they are exposed to eye or face hazards from flying particles, molten metal, liquid chemicals, acid or caustic liquids, chemical gases or vapors, potentially infected material, or potentially harmful light radiation. When selecting the most suitable eye and face protection for employees, employers should take into consideration the following elements: ability to protect against specific workplace hazards, should fit properly and be reasonably comfortable to wear, should provide unrestricted vision and movement, should be durable and cleanable, and should allow unrestricted functioning of any other required PPE. The eye and face protection selected for employees must clearly identify the manufacturer. Some of the most common types of eye and face protection include the following: safety glasses. These protective eyeglasses have safety frames constructed of metal or plastic and impact-resistant lenses. Side shields are available on some models. Goggles. These are tight-fitting eye protection that completely covers the eyes, eye sockets, and the facial area immediately surrounding the eyes and provide protection from impact, dust, and splashes. Some goggles will fit over corrective lenses. Welding shields. Welding shields protect eyes from burns caused by infrared or intense radiant light. They also protect both the eyes and face from flying sparks, metal spatter, and slag chips produced during welding, brazing, soldering, and cutting operations. Face shields. Transparent sheets of ANSI-approved plastic extend from the eyebrows to below the chin and across the width of the head. May be polarized for glare protection, protect against dusts, splashes, and sprays of hazardous liquids, but do not protect against impact hazards, and may be used with goggles or safety glasses for additional protection against impact hazards. Each type of protective eyewear is designed to protect against specific hazards. Employers can identify specific workplace hazards that threaten employees' eyes and faces by completing a hazard assessment. Hard hats can protect workers from head impact, penetration injuries, and electrical injuries such as those caused by falling or flying objects or contact with electrical conductors. Employers must ensure that their employees wear head protection if any of the following apply. Objects might fall from above and strike them on the head. They might bump their head against fixed objects, such as exposed pipes or beams, or there is a possibility of accidental head contact with electrical hazards. Protective helmets or hard hats should do the following: resist penetration by objects, absorb shock of a blow, be water resistant and slow burning, Have a clear instruction explaining the proper adjustment and replacement of the suspension and headband. Hard outer shell and shock-absorbing lining that incorporates a headband and strap that suspend the shell from 1 to 1¼ inches away from the head. Provide shock absorption from during an impact and ventilation during normal wear. Types of hard hats. Class G. Protects against falling objects and electrical shock up to 2,200 volts. Class E. Protects against falling objects and electrical shocks up to 20,000 volts. Class C. Protects against falling objects. Class C hard hats are not designed to use around live electrical wire or corrosives. Another class of protective headgear is called a bump hat, designed for use in areas with low head clearance. These are recommended for areas where protection is needed from head bumps and lacerations. These are not designed to protect against falling or flying objects and are not ANSI approved. It is essential to check the types of hard hats employees are using to ensure that the equipment provides appropriate protection. Each hard hat should bear a label inside the shell that lists the manufacturer, the ANSI designation, and the class of hard hat. Head protection that is either too large or too small is inappropriate for use, even if it meets all other requirements. Most protective headgear comes in a variety of sizes with adjustable headbands to ensure a proper fit. Some allow for the use of various accessories to help employees deal with changing environmental conditions, such as slots for earmuffs, safety glasses, face shields, and mounted lights. A daily inspection of the hard hat shell, suspension system, and other accessories for holes, cracks, tears, or other damage that might compromise the protective value of the hat is essential. Never drill holes, paint, or apply labels to protective headgear, as they may reduce the integrity of the protection. Do not store protective headgear in direct sunlight. Extreme heat can damage them. Stickers are not typically allowed on hats as they prohibit a thorough inspection for cracks and defects. Hard hats with any of the following defects should be removed from service and replaced: perforation, cracking, or deformity of the brim or shell, indication of exposure of the brim or shell to heat, chemicals, or ultraviolet and other radiation. Always replace a hard hat if it sustains an impact, even if the damage is not noticeable. Workers at risk of possible foot or leg injuries from falling, rolling objects, crushing or penetrating materials should wear protective footwear. Examples of situations in which an employee should wear foot or leg protection include when heavy objects such as barrels or tools might roll onto or fall on the employee's feet, working with sharp objects such as nails or spikes that could pierce the soles or uppers of ordinary shoes, working on or around hot, wet, or slippery surfaces, working when electrical hazards are present, and working in a welding area. Leggings protects the lower legs and feet from heat hazards such as molten metal or welding sparks. Metatarsal guards protects the instep area from impact and compression. Made of aluminum, steel, fiber, or plastic, these guards may be strapped to the outside of shoes. Toe guards fits over the toes of regular shoes to protect the toes from impact and compression hazards. They may be made from steel, aluminum, or plastic. Combination foot and shin guards protects the lower legs and feet and may be used in combination with toe guards when greater protection is needed. Safety boots have impact-resistant toes and heat-resistant soles that protect the feet against hot work surfaces. In heavy spark areas, use fire-resistant boot protectors or leather spats strapped around your pant legs and boot tops to prevent injury and burn. Safety shoes may also be designed to be electrically conductive to prevent the buildup of static electricity in areas with the potential of explosive atmospheres, or non-conductive to protect employees from workplace electrical hazards. Safety footwear should be inspected prior to each use, checked for wear and tear at reasonable intervals, looking for cracks or holes, separation of materials, broken buckles, or laces. The soles of shoes should be checked for pieces of metal or embedded items that could present electrical or tripping hazards. Potential hazards include skin absorption of harmful substances, chemical or thermal burns, electrical dangers, bruises, abrasions, cuts, punctures, fractures, and amputations. Protective equipment includes gloves, finger guards, and arm coverings or elbow-length gloves. It is essential that employees use gloves specifically designed for the hazards and tasks found in their workplace, because gloves designed for one function may not protect against a different function, even though they appear to be an appropriate protective device. Types of protective gloves: gloves made of leather, canvas, or metal mesh, fabric and coated fabric gloves, chemical and liquid-resistant gloves. Leather, canvas, or metal mesh gloves. Sturdy gloves made from metal mesh, leather, or canvas provide protection against cuts and burns. Leather or canvas gloves also protect against sustained heat. Fabric gloves. Protects against dirt, slivers, chafing, and abrasions. They do not provide sufficient protection for use of rough, sharp, or heavy materials. Chemical and liquid-resistant gloves. Chemical-resistant gloves are made with different types of rubber. As a general rule, the thicker the glove material, the greater the chemical resistance. Check safety data sheets to determine types of gloves to have available. Protective gloves should be inspected before each use to ensure they are not torn, punctured, or made ineffective in any way. A visual inspection will help detect cuts or tears. Gloves that are discolored or stiff may also indicate deficiencies caused by excessive use or degradation from chemical exposure.
Determining the need to provide hearing protection for employees can be challenging.
Employees' exposure to excessive noise depends upon a number of factors, including the loudness of noise as measured in decibels, the duration of each employee's exposure to the noise, whether employees move between work areas with different noise levels, and whether noise is generated from one or multiple sources. If engineering and work practice controls do not lower employee exposure to workplace noise to acceptable levels, employees must wear appropriate hearing protection. It is important to understand that hearing protectors reduce only the amount of noise that gets through the ears. The amount of this reduction is referred to as attenuation, which differs according to the types of hearing protection used and how well it fits. If employees are exposed to occupational noise at or above 85 decibels, averaged over an 8-hour period, the employer is required to institute a hearing conservation program that includes regular testing of employees' hearing by qualified professionals. Earplugs offer the most hearing protection. Insert a disposable earplug into the ear by rolling it into a small diameter oval and inserting it into the ear canal. The ear should be pulled up and back as the plug is inserted. Then, hold the plug in the ear for several seconds to allow it to expand and fit securely. Earmuffs. Earmuffs are only as effective as the seal around the entire ear. Facial hair and eyeglasses can decrease the protection earmuffs can provide because they get in the way of the seal. If earmuffs are cracked, cut, or missing gaskets, they are not as effective in protecting the worker's hearing. These two types of hearing protection will save a worker's hearing when they are exposed to loud noises day after day. However, employers should warn their employees that hearing protection may block out important safety warning signs like alarms or other coworkers yelling for assistance. When engineering controls are not feasible, workers must use appropriate respirators to protect against adverse health effects caused by breathing air contaminated with harmful dusts, fogs, fumes, mists, gases, smokes, sprays, or vapors. Respirators generally cover the nose and mouth, or the entire face or head, and help prevent illness and injury. A proper fit is essential. However, for respirators to be effective, required respirators must be NIOSH approved, and medical evaluation and training must be provided before use. In some cases, workers must shield most or all of their bodies against hazards in the workplace, such as exposure to heat and radiation, as well as hot metals, scalding liquids, body fluids, hazardous materials or waste, and other hazards. As a part of this PPE program, you must do the following. Assess the workplace for hazards. Implement engineering administration controls to eliminate the hazards identified. Select appropriate PPE to protect employees from hazards that cannot be eliminated or controlled. Inform your employees why the PPE is necessary and when it must be worn. Train your employees how to use and care for the selected PPE and how to recognize damaged PPE. And require your employees to wear the selected PPE in the workplace. Shifting our mindsets towards PPE usage is perhaps the most important factor in influencing PPE compliance. If a worker is rushing or frustrated, then this state of mind is going to put them at a greater risk of not following the company's PPE regulations at that time. Have any of your actions allowed for any impression that at-risk behaviors are acceptable as long as the job gets done? We all know that simply satisfying OSHA compliance guidelines does not prevent an incident from occurring. The better course of action is to shift the safety culture from a compliance mindset to one centered on fostering an environment in which people are committed to consciously seeking safe ways to work. Here's what committing to a culture of safety looks like. You undertake safety situational planning and conduct regular risk assessments. Employees are key members in helping to develop safe work methods. You conduct field observations to monitor what safety measures look like in practice and routinely conduct audits to verify your capabilities. You reduce the risks associated with workplace tasks to the lowest levels possible. And finally, a shift occurs with employees' attitudes
In that PPE usage is a non-negotiable.
Work doesn't begin until PPE is on, not because someone said we had to, but because we sincerely believe that using it is good for all of us.